Imagine this. You log on to Amazon, America's marketplace, the digital mall of the world, and instead of millions of products at your fingertips, you see a message no one thought possible. Amazon is exiting the US market, a silence falls, a paradox emerges. Because tariffs designed to protect American jobs have now chased away one of the country's largest employers. A policy meant to shield consumers has become the very reason they pay more. A strategy built on strength now exposes weakness. This is not a science fiction scenario, it's today's economic reality. Amazon, a company that fueled more than 40% of all U.S. e-commerce, employing over 1.5 million Americans, has been cornered by rising costs, shattered supply chains, and a tariff wall that turned into a trap. What does it mean when the platform that made goods affordable for millions suddenly collapses under the weight of tariffs? What happens when the world's richest company says, we cannot afford to stay here anymore? The shock is not just about Amazon. The shock is about the American consumer, the American worker, the American dream, now at risk of vanishing behind the wall of tariffs. The story begins with a trade war, one of the most ambitious economic gambles in modern U.S. history. In 2018, the Trump administration slapped tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods, later expanding them to nearly $500 billion. Rates jumped from 10% to 25%, hitting everything from electronics to furniture, from toys to machinery. The rationale was simple but bold. Tariffs would level the playing field, protect American workers, and punish China for what Washington called unfair trade practices. But economics rarely follows political slogans. Amazon stood at the very heart of this conflict. Over 60% of sellers on its platform are international, and the majority of them come from China. For these small and medium exporters, tariffs were not just a number on paper, they were a death sentence to competitiveness. And so a paradox grew sharper. The very policy designed to help U.S. consumers and workers was cutting off the lifeline of cheap supply that kept prices low and markets vibrant. What happens when you choke the artery of global trade? The cost doesn't just stop at the border. It seeps into every cart, every checkout, every household. The tariff war was never just against China. It was against America's own economy. For years, Amazon thrived on scale, efficiency, and global reach. But tariffs changed the math overnight. Every container that once brought affordable goods from Shenzhen or Shanghai now carried an added burden, an invisible tax passed on to sellers, then to consumers. The costs piled up, and the calculus stopped working. Analysts estimate that tariffs added nearly $75 billion annually to Amazon sourcing costs. A phone case once imported at $2 suddenly cost $3.5 before shipping. A $20 headset ballooned to $35. Multiply that by millions of products, and the platform's promise of low prices, wide selection began to crumble. For sellers, the squeeze was brutal. A small electronics manufacturer in Guangdong saw exports to the U.S. collapse by 30% in less than a year. American resellers faced impossible choices: double their prices, cut their margins to zero, or shut down altogether. Inside the U.S., the ripple effects hit logistics. Warehouses that relied on high turnover to justify thin margins saw volume shrink. Distribution costs rose by 15%. Drivers delivered fewer packages. Workers clocked fewer hours. At some point, the equation was undeniable. Amazon, once a symbol of endless expansion, chose to pull out rather than bleed dry. Better to protect its global dominance in Europe, India, and Latin America than to sink billions into a hostile domestic market. And so the exits began. A seller is going to lose his market. A warehouse worker is going to lose her job. A consumer is going to lose her choice. Tariffs promised protection. What they delivered was retreat. What they delivered was Amazon, an American icon, walking away from America itself. The collapse of Amazon's U.S. operations triggered a chain reaction that rippled across every corner of the economy. The first and most visible blow came at the checkout counter. Prices soared. Economists estimate that tariffs and Amazon's exit combined to add nearly $1,200 a year to the average American household's expenses. A $20 set of headphones now costs $35. A $300 laptop is suddenly $480. The promise of affordability gone in an instant. But higher prices were only the beginning. Jobs vanished. Amazon directly employed more than 1.5 million Americans, from engineers in Seattle to warehouse pickers in Ohio. Beyond that, another 2 million contractors, delivery drivers, and seasonal temps dependent on its ecosystem. With Amazon's withdrawal, those jobs evaporated overnight. What was once the nation's fastest growing employment engine turned into a hollow shell. The impact reached far beyond Amazon's gates. Small businesses that relied on Amazon's marketplace lost access to customers. Trucking companies with fleets dedicated to prime deliveries parked their vehicles. Packaging suppliers, third-party sellers, and even software startups tied to Amazon's platform faced sudden collapse. And the national picture grew darker. Economists projected a 1.2% contraction in GDP within a year, erasing gains made in previous quarters. Consumer spending slowed, investment dried up, confidence faltered. Is sovereignty worth empty shelves? Is protection worth unemployment lines? These are not abstract questions. They are the reality of millions of Americans waking up to find opportunity replaced by uncertainty. The paradox is cruel. Warehouses full of unsold goods, yet families empty of hope. A tariff wall meant to shield America has instead sealed off its prosperity. The economic shock quickly spilled into the social fabric. Communities that once saw Amazon as a lifeline are now left in disarray. In rural America, warehouses had become the beating heart of small towns, steady paychecks, health insurance, and the promise of stability. When the jobs disappeared, so did the sense of security. Empty parking lots now mirror empty futures. Small businesses were hit even harder. Thousands of entrepreneurs who built livelihoods through Amazon Marketplace suddenly lost access to customers. For many, Amazon wasn't just a sales channel, it was survival. Without it, bankruptcy is not a threat, it is an inevitability. The political consequences are equally profound. The very workers who once cheered for tariffs, believing they would bring factories back, are now standing in unemployment lines. The slogans of protection have turned into the silence of despair. And the paradox grows sharper. What was promised as independence has delivered dependence on higher prices, on fewer choices, on political promises that never materialized. Communities feel betrayed, small business owners feel abandoned, workers feel expendable. The crisis reveals a deeper truth. Tariffs may win applause at rallies, but they cannot fill shopping carts or pay mortgages. Protectionism sounds powerful on paper, yet it weakens the very backbone of the nation, the consumer, the worker, the dreamer. The question is no longer whether tariffs protect America. The question is whether America can survive their protection. While the United States grappled with empty warehouses and lost jobs, Amazon wasted no time pivoting abroad. Europe, India, and Southeast Asia became the new frontiers. In Germany and the UK, Amazon doubled its investments. In India, it poured billions into logistics and digital payments. Southeast Asia, once a secondary market, suddenly became the crown jewel of growth. The irony is stark. As America closed its doors, the world opened theirs wider. The tariffs that pushed Amazon out of its home market accelerated its integration into global supply chains elsewhere. And so the paradox deepens. The walls built to keep competition out ended up keeping prosperity in. America shrinks while the rest of the world expands. The global consumer still shops, still spends, still benefits, just not within U.S. borders. In the battle for economic dominance, retreat is not neutral, retreat is defeat, and the world is already moving on. Tariffs were never just about trade, they were about identity, sovereignty, and politics. But the Amazon exodus exposes their blunt reality. They punish consumers more than competitors. They shield one industry while suffocating another. The lesson is unavoidable. Protectionism carries a hidden cost. Protect one job, lose 3. Save one factory, shutter 10 warehouses, raise one wall, build 10 more problems. Economics is unforgiving. Markets do not bend to slogans. When policy ignores reality, reality pushes back with higher prices, lost jobs, and diminished power. The larger lesson is clear. Isolation weakens. Engagement empowers. America now faces a sobering truth. When Amazon, the very symbol of convenience and scale, cannot survive within U.S. borders, what does that say about the system itself? The tariffs that promised revival have instead delivered retreat. The strategy meant to defend the American worker has stripped millions of their livelihoods. A nation that once exported dreams is now importing despair. A country that once set the standard for global commerce is watching opportunity slip through its fingers. And unless there is a course correction, Amazon will not be the last to walk away. This is not merely about economics, it is about choices. Do Americans choose higher prices in the name of pride? Do they accept fewer jobs in the name of protection? Or do they demand smarter policies that balance sovereignty with prosperity? The warning is clear. Tariffs may build walls, but walls cannot build futures. If this analysis made you think twice about the price of politics, don't let the conversation end here. Hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because this debate is not just about trade, it's about the soul of a nation and whether it can still deliver the promise of prosperity.